can you be racist against white people?
Well, you can unless you purposely change the definition of racism.
And welcome to yet another episode of the Three Speech Podcast. Today we're joined by a very special guest. He is a historian, a philosopher, part-time musician, all-time bon vivant. It's Mr. Lewis Chase. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you go. Welcome to the pod. Listen, I brought you on because I think you've got good historical knowledge. I want to go over some historical stuff going on today. For example, national service, what you think about that, your opinion on that. Also, get out of the way. You're Egyptian. I'm Iranian. So we formed the Axis of Evil. We both went to school together. Your lightings made you look even more evil. You look like that sergeant or whatever it is from the Vietnam movie now. You know that one with Marlon Brando. Your lighting's gone really mad. Now it's gone off completely.
Okay, let us just make clear. This is our third attempt. The first time, the lighting was amazing, and you can't really see it here. I have a wonderful sunset background here with the bonsai tree. Okay. The second time was terrible because the sun suddenly changed, and now it's burning my face here and bathing me in darkness here.
It looks like there's a big black guy just standing off to the left of camera, having his knob in front of you, and it's casting a shadow over your face. Could be a white guy. That was racist to say a black guy. White guys can have large penises as well. Either way, there's a guy casting his penis shadow on your face.
A general person of color of indeterminate ethnicity. Let's just say that.
That's right. Listen, you're Egyptian. So I guess that focuses a lot of your worldview, I would say. And before we came on air, we were talking about. So Louis, for the listeners, he's you were not what I would call woke. However, growing up, a lot of your views are now what would be perceived as woke. Like, you're the first person I ever spoke to who told me that Churchill was a cunt. He's a massive cunt. He started the concentration camps. And I remember thinking at the time, like, how can Winston Churchill, he beat the Nazis? You're like, no, he's not what he's cracked up to be. So like, how did you come to that opinion, like, at that age, and have you changed your opinion on that subsequently?
I came to that conclusion because I was raised in an Egyptian household, and I can understand. We have a good friend called Sig Mike. His grandfather fought on D-Day, so he raised his kids to learn about the battle against the Nazis and how important that was and the sacrifice. My dad wasn't on D-Day, nor was his father. My grandfather grew up with British soldiers on his streets, with the RAF stationed in Egypt, with the Egyptian king being inferior.
Why were the British in Egypt at that point? Were they there because of the World War II, or what were they there for?
No. The British arrived in 1882 to put down a revolt against Egypt's monarch by the Egyptian army. And that was done rapidly. And immediately afterwards, they said, we will remain only so long as to restore the authority of the Egyptian monarch. And they stayed for 74 years.
And did they restore it? The authority of the Egyptian monarch?
They did more than that, yeah. They restored it, and then they took over complete control, but not officially. Officially, they were just there to help and to advise and to assist, which involved closing down all Egyptian factories, making Egyptians sell their raw materials at a discounted price to Britain, and then buy the finished goods from Britain, which formerly were made in Egypt. It reduced the Egyptian army. Sorry, what?
It's a good deal.
It's a great deal for them, a fantastic deal. They closed down all the armaments factories, which meant Egypt had to buy its military equipment from Britain, which they wouldn't sell them. It meant that anything Egypt wanted to do internationally had to ask Britain first. And this was all without even being annexed. Officially, it wasn't part of the empire. It was just advice and assistance. But in reality, it meant British soldiers, a British ambassador running the show, and if the king objected, he would find tanks outside his palace, which actually happened. Um, when the Egyptian king appointed a new prime minister after an election, and Churchill didn't like that prime minister, he sent tanks outside the palace and said, "You either replace this prime minister with the one that I choose, or you get exiled forever." So, um, my dad grew up with that. He grew up seeing soldiers in the streets. When he was a kid, they invaded again. They only left 5 months earlier. They left in June of '56 and came back in November '56, bombing, invading,
Yeah,
killing.
because it's too
And
hot between June and November in Egypt.
yeah,
Summertime.
it's peak summertime.
Yeah.
The price is too high. The flights cost too much. Come back in the autumn. Um, so he was bombed by the RAF, and people died, etc. So he raised me knowing these facts with a healthy dose of opinion as well. So I grew up strongly disliking Churchill, and more than that, disliking how no one here knew about him. They only knew the good things, and
So,
there are many good things.
so tell us what we don't know about him, because you're telling us. So what do we not know about him? Like our listeners will probably not know about him now either. That you think that we don't know about him.
I think the best way to learn about Churchill is to read his own quotes. Um, he his he spoke of his desire for the triumph of the Aryan stock. That's a direct quote, the Aryan stock, which sounds surprising given that a certain mustachioed man from Austria had a similar worldview. He spoke about how he didn't spend his youth killing savages just so that they could get independence after the war. Um, as for India, he said, quote, "I hate Indians," end quote, which is kind of hard years later
It's
to retroactively
problematic.
slightly.
He never even dealt with an Indian call center worker either. So like,
I don't believe he was ever scammed by one of the Indian call centers either. So
yeah.
he had strong views in that regard, and that's not even discussing yet the Bengal famine, which I think killed 3 to 4 million Indians. Um, so there's many things about Churchill which no one here knew, and it was frustrating because, from my perspective, this villainous, evil dude, and everyone else, oh, he was a hero. But as I got older, I didn't change my mind so much as it became more contextualized. Because we were saying a few minutes ago, my enemy's enemy is my friend. If my enemy is the United Kingdom government, then my friend must be their enemy, namely Germany. Yeah, but Germany can also be my enemy. Like, uh, they've shown a willingness to invade every single one of their neighbors. Why wouldn't they want to do the same to me? And if you compare the viciousness of Churchill in some respects to the viciousness of Hitler in all respects, you might say, well, one is even worse than the other. Added to that, he was a very eloquent man. Eloquence goes a long way. You can have the
and
most.
he's got the best intro for an Iron Maiden song.
Well, put it this way: Iron Maiden never selected Hitler or Stalin or Mussolini for the intro to Aces High, the live version. They chose Churchill. It's a rousing speech. Even me, disliking the man, I can't deny the quality of that intro. So yeah. But the main thing was that growing up, knowing certain facts about him, which facts were hidden from everyone here until relatively recently, is frustrating. And that's why I tried very hard to indoctrinate you at the age of 13, so we'd have the same view henceforth. There's a few things that I've helped Darius understand. One is the history and the greatness of rock and roll and heavy metal. One is about Winston Churchill. And the third, well, actually, there's many more, but we can discuss those on
I
other
think you've
episodes.
helped shape a lot of my political and historical opinion. I usually go to you just to find out the details. Although I'm fully aware that you do sometimes selectively edit what I am to know. So you turn me on to Van Halen, and You gave me, so here, this is Panama, which is a great, is it Panama or was it Jump?
No, it was Hot for Teacher.
Hot for Teacher, which is a great song, but you just decided to take off the drum introduction. So I'd been listening to it for years, and then suddenly I listened to a version, to the official version, which wasn't downloaded illegally from somewhere, and it had a big intro. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, yeah, I didn't like it, so I took it off.
I have to explain that. Okay, I like Van Halen up to and including when David Lee Roth left the band. After that, not so much, or at all really. Hot for Teacher, fantastic song. The first 30 seconds is a self-indulgent drum solo by Alex Van Halen. I had no time for that. And I thought, this man has gone his entire life without hearing this. He doesn't need to hear it now. So I decided that the song would begin with the first guitar licks and forget the drums. And that's how you knew it for 10 years until you came across the actual unedited version.
Well, so taking that into account, sometimes I take a little bit of your historical, with a tiny bit, just with a pinch of salt. But I think like, so you're Egyptian and you're Muslim, right? And I think you're surprised. You're actually a pretty devout Muslim, and you are crazy, but you're not like a jihad Muslim, if you know what I mean, right? You're not. Are you the kind of Islamist that Leo is against?
Well, I appreciate that characterization. You're crazy, but you're not totally jihadi.
This is how I know. This is how you can tell if a Muslim's actually a devout Muslim. If they go to the shop to buy sweets and they start checking if they contain pork, like that's a devout Muslim, right? That's how I would say it. Or if they've got a mark on their forehead from headbutting the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. By way of example, then, I went to Manowar's last tour. Manowar, for those you don't know, is an amazing heavy metal band. Amongst their finest lyrics are, "We will die for metal." No one's asking for that level of dedication, but they give it anyway. They say they'll die for it. And at the time, my hair was all the way down here. Wonderful mane of rock and roll hair. I was covered in bangles and chains, skulls everywhere. And like a Manowar fan. After the gig, hanging out with some people, and a girl offered me a drink. I said, "Oh, no, thank you." And she said, "Oh, are you driving home?" I said, "Yeah, but that's not why I'm not drinking." And she said, "Why?" I said, "I'm Muslim." And she said, "Cool." It's like, it's not cool. What do you mean cool? And I knew what it was. She was not expecting someone who looked like me to say that he was Muslim. And she didn't want to appear bigoted or racist or anything. She said, "Oh, cool." And then she looked at how pale my skin was. And she's like, "Something's not right here." She's like, "Have you always been Muslim?" I was like, "Yes." She's like, "Cool, that's good. It's good you're Muslim." Yeah, I don't look as I'm expected to look, I suppose. I tell you this. I really like Islam. I like it a lot. Muslims, I can take them or leave them, because the ones you hear about the most are the ones who go to the greatest extreme, give you a hard time, make everything a misery. Some want to ban music, some want to ban long hair, ban short hair, ban beards, insist upon beards. Every single item on the agenda becomes a headache. It's a very small minority, but if you ask our friend Leo, they're the only ones that exist. If he tells you about this, "Oh no, they're all the same. They're all like this." I have one Muslim friend here who isn't, but the rest are like that. Now, most are not like that. But for example, alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't drink. I don't mind if you do. And in fact, you're not that big a drinker.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing is, if I'm totally sober, I can assist you if you do something too insane when you're drunk. I have to admit, I didn't assist you when you got totally wasted and that Greek Cypriot took you into the bathroom for 30 minutes. But that was because I was late. That actually did happen.
That was at university. I decided it would be a good time to down an entire bottle of Jack Daniels, or whatever it was, a bottle of whiskey. Or something.
It actually was a bottle and a half of Glenfiddich.
Well, there you go. And then apparently I was being somewhat annoying in the halls of residence, and a large Greek Cypriot guy took me into a bathroom. I've never been the same again. Never been the same again.
Yeah, but at least because I was sober, I remember it to let you know what happened, or at least let you know let you know the general story.
But
But it,
enough about my anal virginity and that night of passion. How does Islam? So I was chatting to my friend Ayman. He's like, listen, ask Louis about Islam and how it shapes his worldview, and whether Muslims are misrepresented. How you feel as a Muslim now today in the UK? Like, can you kind of expand on those kind of points?
well, don't forget, officially, we're broadcasting from parts unknown. For all you know, this could be Miami, not the UK. But let's just say it's
That's
the
right.
UK.
From parts unknown. Well, Muslim in the West.
What's the West? Well, also, Ayman said, discuss Islam, but try to keep it light, which is an interesting suggestion. That's like saying, discuss Jupiter, but let's not discuss gas. Well, okay, well, that's going to be a tough sell. Um, Basically, um, things were already difficult for Muslims in general prior to certain events in September 2001. But they were getting bit by bit a little bit better. People began to understand what the religion is, what people are doing. After that happened or was done, it became just and you can say anything now. Anything you want, you can say, and there'll be some newspaper who will say, "Oh yes, that's what Islam is. Sharia this, Sharia that, beheading this, chopping off hands that." And it's it's difficult to try to live in a society where the starting point is you have to defend that. You have to explain it away and say, actually, what you've heard is incorrect. It's not really like this. And if it was, how come you and I are friends? If truly it was as you imagine, how is it that most of us can get along and enjoy the same kind of pastimes without killing each other? So the starting point always is that defensive thing. You have to explain that it isn't these things that you've been told
But a
by
lot. But the
certain.
argument is a lot of people see that, and there is like, I mean, I guess it's the media presenting it, but that does is you do see some, like, behead all those who insult Islam. We are behead all those who say Islam is not a religion of peace.
Yeah, I
You got terrible PR, is what I'm saying.
there are some amazing signs along the. How dare you say it's not peaceful? I will now kill you. Um, but it's akin to imagine this. Imagine if an Egyptian broadcaster to say, let's discover what life is like for the average English person, and then went to interview Tommy Robinson or the EDL and said, give me your opinion as a considered as a British person. You wouldn't broadcast that and say this is the general view of most people in the country. You'd say this is an outlier, this is the exception to the rule. Most people in this society are easygoing, nice, tolerant, and we've chosen to interview a guy with very warped views. So if you go to a rally of 14 people with the longest, dirtiest beards who look like evil Santa Claus, you're expecting to hear the same kind of rubbish. If you go to a larger crowd of people with perhaps more kempt beards, relaxing, chilling out, you're going to hear messages which will be peaceful but not very interesting.
So all right
No one
then.
wants to.
What is Sharia law like from a Muslim point of view? Explain to us what Sharia law is, and do you want to inflict it upon us, you
This is
personally?
getting a lot deeper than I anticipated.
That's right. I'll
Okay.
take it.
Uh, there's no such thing as Sharia law. Sharia is a wide and expansive.
Sharia.
Yeah, because that's how it's spelled. It's Shariah, Sharia, not Sharia law.
Okay.
There's no such thing as Sharia law. The only ones who say there's Sharia law are the maniacs on this side and the maniacs on this side who want to only focus on those. In reality, Sharia is a wide and expansive collection of different things regarding diet, regarding marriage, divorce, adoption, regarding health, regarding inheritance, many, many things. in addition to what you should do for murder, what you should do for certain kinds of assault, what you should do for stealing. But most of it doesn't deal with any of that at all. For example, not drinking alcohol, that pertains to Sharia. Not eating pork products is Sharia. What money you would give to your children upon your death, that's Sharia. These are the things that it discusses. Sharia law is a modern day invention. It doesn't exist except in this false narrative.
So
I'm
where's
not.
this? But where's this false narrative come from? Is this the hadiths? Like, so I heard. My understanding is you got the Quran, which is basically like the Bible. Then you have hadiths, which is what I've heard is where all the craziness comes from. So the hadiths are like, and correct me if I'm wrong. Hadiths are like, I don't know, addendums to the Quran added by others, and then these can be massively misconstrued, and people take them to mean whatever they want, but they're not like actually in the Quran, which is the Islamic Bible, so to say.
Okay, with the proviso that I'm not a theologian, and I invite others to correct me.
Wait, you're not a
And so,
theologian? Get the fuck off the podcast.
no, my bid's too short. And with the second proviso that you're sneaky, you never mentioned we would go into this level of complexity. Okay.
You're leaning out of camera as well. Go in the middle. No, that's out. Can you not see yourself on the screen? Yeah, that's in the middle.
I can, but I still have the sun burning my cheek.
Fair enough. No, well, now that's even worse. Yeah, that's better. Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, Muslims believe that the Quran came from God, that God decreed it, the Archangel Gabriel transmitted it, and Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, received it. They do not believe that it's from Muhammad. They believe Muhammad was simply a man. He was born, he lived, he died. He's not returning in this lifetime. He possesses no supernatural powers. He cannot save your soul. He was just a man. May he rest in peace. Peace be upon him. You've disappeared.
I know. You started talking about Muhammad, and the camera's gone mad. Why is this?
It's censoring it. So whether or not someone else believes that it comes from God, the Muslims do. And the oldest copy of the Quran sits in a museum in Istanbul, formerly Constantinople. And if you compare the Arabic text of that oldest Quran to a modern day Quran, it's exactly the same. It's unchanged. The English translations, the French translations, they can change because you're trying to capture what the Arabic language really means. But the Arabic version is written the same. The Hadith, as you were kind of saying, you use the word addendum. It's more of an explanation. So if the Quran says pray 5 times a day, it doesn't tell you what that involves. So you look to the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to see how did he pray? What did he do? If the Quran says that if you commit a sin, you should free a slave, something like that. Say, well, what kind of sins and how do you free him? So you look to the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him. It's not so much an addendum as it is an explanation of what's in the Quran. However, there are some hadiths which don't seem to make any sense at all. If you look at the black and white letter of the book, it says, thou shalt not do A, B, C, D. And then a hadith which says, do all of these and do these to the nth degree and make sure you kill everyone. So if you treat the Quran as the constitution, then anything that's contrary to that, you wouldn't accept, or you'd say, evidently, our modern day understanding of this cannot be right because it contradicts what's in the book. So in essence, anything that's in the book is the constitution, and anything else has to be taken in line with it. If it's contrary to it, then you don't do it. For example, I'll give you an example. The Quran says time and time again, no compulsion in religion, no compulsion in religion.
What does that
That's
mean?
from Muslims. It means God is saying pray 5 times a day. But he's also saying don't force anyone to pray. They should, but don't force them. It says fast during the month of Ramadan, but it says no compulsion. So if someone doesn't fast, don't punish them. It says do various things, but it's up to your own decision as an individual to do it. if you choose not to pray or not to fast, it is not for someone else to punish you for it. If you say that, some of the people say, how dare you? You have to punish everyone. It's like, well, the book doesn't say that. The book says the opposite. Another example, it says, Christians and Jews, on them shall be no fear. No fear. They believe in me like you do. Leave them alone. Hadith, kill them all now. Kill them now. So it's like, well, there's an inconsistency here. So given that we all accept, if you're Muslim, that the Quran is the word of God, then you go for that first. And if it says leave them alone, leave them alone. And that has been true for most of Muslim history. If you go back 14 centuries, that's why when Europeans were butchering Jews for centuries, the only place in Europe that was safe was the Iberian Peninsula, Andalus, Muslim Spain. That was called the golden age of European Jewry because they could live there in peace, with some notable exceptions. It's important to note, because it was live and let live. But the modern day view amongst the minority is the polar opposite, and it has become the mirror image of medieval Christianity, which was, as you know, pretty freaking nuts.
What?
Spanish
Why?
Inquisition.
Oh yeah.
Well, think about this. We went to a Catholic school, and Thomas More was celebrated as a saint, a martyr, whatever. And I can understand why, because he was put to death for opposing Henry VIII's break with Rome. What we weren't taught was that Thomas More was basically an inquisitor. He went around trying to find heretics and have them tortured and executed. He supported Henry VIII burning people alive for their religious beliefs. But we were taught he was a nice guy and that he died for his beliefs. Yeah, he did, but his beliefs were pretty freaking messed up because they involved burning people to death. Everyone discusses Bloody Mary, Henry VIII's daughter. They don't discuss how many people he burned to death.
Who's Bloody
So,
Mary?
Bloody Mary was the eldest daughter of Henry VIII, and she's a whack job. She's freaking nuts. Henry VIII had 3 legitimate kids who lived past infancy. He also had a bastard, illegitimate child, and some other illegitimate children. It is alleged. But when he dies, the throne goes to his son, who was the youngest. He was a Protestant, so the country becomes fully Protestant. He dies, throne passes to his sister, Mary. She's freaking nuts. She had a very bad childhood because Henry messed around on her mom, gave her a hard time. So she's messed in the head. And she blames Protestants for everything, for her mother's troubles, for her awful childhood, for every single thing. And she says, we're Catholic again. And if you disagree, I'm going to burn you. And she burned people. She burned to death the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Archbishop went to the back.
I bet she would have supported Celtic.
I also like Celtic, but for different reasons. Yeah. And also, she married the King of Castile, who treated her like garbage. And her greatest dream was to have a baby with him, to unite the thrones of England and Castile and Aragon, and have a Catholic united front against the Protestants. Turned out she wasn't pregnant. She had cancer. And immediately he dumped her. He's like, forget this. Came back to Spain, left her to die. So yeah, that's Bloody Mary.
So history
But
can be cruel.
yeah, a little bit. But there are Muslims who have become the mirror image of that. Exclusionary, totalitarian, wanting to punish anyone who has a different viewpoint. And even though they are minority, they're the ones that you see the cameras focusing on. If they focused on someone, I'm not saying me, but someone a little different, they'd say, but you don't fit what we're looking for. We're not looking for someone who's going to speak in calm tones about the religion. We're looking for the nutcases. You remember after Brexit, they went to Doncaster and asked people, why did you vote for Brexit? Oh, I voted to ban the Muslims. But that's nothing to do with Brexit. They went out of their way to find anyone who would give you an answer based in ignorance. They never said to someone, why do you vote Brexit? Oh, because I'm opposed to the common fisheries policy. because no one wants to discuss the common fisheries policy. They want to discuss racism and so on and so forth. So they pick people who they know will have a certain effect on the news
Who
audience.
do you
It's the
think's
same
going
thing
to
with
win
us.
the election?
Unless we find out that one of the leaders of the other parties has massive skeletons in the closet or is caught in some kind of sting,
Mm.
it's going to be so-called Labour, which is like an even more right-wing version than Tony Blair's Labour Party, a reprehensible movement of warmongering scum. I think most likely them. But then again, the current batch are a reprehensible gang of warmongering scum. So
It's
you're
a
going to
rock and a
choose.
hard place.
My sister, she recently joined the Socialist Party, which, if you knew anything about my family, you can imagine my dad's surprise at that.
Yeah.
A few days ago, she was saying, unfortunately, my beloved Socialist Workers' Party is not running a candidate in this area. I said, Socialist Workers' Party? You didn't join that one. You joined their arch rivals, the Socialist Party. She goes, did I? I said, yes, you did. So even she doesn't know what you're doing.
What's a
So
socialist? It's like that thing from Monty Python, the Judea's
Monty
People's
Python.
Front, the Front People Judea.
That is exactly it. We were at a rally. I won't mention what for, and they had a stand here, and it said the Socialist Party. It's like, oh, Socialist Party. Right next door, Socialist Workers' Party, and they wouldn't look at each other, just staring straight ahead, arch enemies. And now there's also the Workers' Party. So you got Socialist Party, Workers' Party, and Socialist Workers' Party.
Which must be the
And
best because it's both of them combined.
I guess so, but given
But
that they have no MPs and have never had any MPs, I think the chances of them taking Downing Street are minimal.
what is a listen? Socialism is like a dirty word to some people on the right. Like, break that down. I'm surprised that your sisters joined the Socialist Party as well. Then.
Okay, if I can segue slightly as a way of answering.
Mm.
I remember my dad,
You have my
and
permission.
thank you very much. Again, I'll have to be somewhat evasive with my description, but some said to him, "You're only doing this to make money," as if it's a bad thing. He said, "Absolutely." He said, "Capitalism is the investment of capital for one purpose only, to generate more capital. And that's exactly what I'm doing." And he was very open about it. However, in his youth in Egypt, he was a socialist and he was in the streets shouting and this and that. Um, because in some societies, at some points in their development, socialism can be very helpful. If you have a basically feudal society where you have monarchy and aristocracy, gentry, and everyone else is lower down, without rights, without land, without housing. If you suddenly say, okay, there's free healthcare, free universities, um, there's support for families, all this, it can radically change a developing society into something semi-industrialized. However, if you've already reached that stage of a development, you already have industrialization, then you might say, yeah, but why am I working 9 to 5 to give money to someone else? I want to keep more of what I earn. So that's a very poor explanation of socialism. But my perspective is that in some societies, at some levels of development, it can be very helpful. And at other points, it can actually be harder to justify. Think about this. Let's say if you make £1,000 out of this podcast, which you're not going to do, but let's say you did. You took the time to buy the camera. I took the time to get a very bad scenario of me getting burned by the sun. We put some effort into this. Why would we want to give away £600 of that to somebody else? You want to give away the minimum possible to someone else. Otherwise, why do it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a Monday afternoon. We just take it easy. So you'd say, I don't want you to take my money involuntarily from me. Give it to someone else. They say, yeah, but isn't that the National Health Service? The NHS is funded by taxpayers. That's socialism. The police department, taxpayers. That's socialism. The fire brigade, funded by taxpayers. That's socialism. So if you stop paying taxes for the things that everyone needs, then it's every man for himself. And in America, the problem you have is that there's no NHS, and it's very much dog eat dog. It's a lot more fun that way. It's a lot more exciting.
Well, you lived in
But
America. What do you think about what were the differences between like their healthcare system and the NHS? What was your opinion on that? Was their way better? Or I mean, it seems to me I lived there as well, and it didn't need to go there, but you know, every now and then I might need like Elsa needed an inhaler for her asthma, right? Which in England you just go to the chemist, it's free or it's whatever the prescription is. She had to buy a prescription every month for an inhaler, even though she had full insurance, and it was costing her like 200, 300 quid a month just for the one inhaler, something like that.
there's an Egyptian proverb that the Americans moved from the Stone Age to the Space Age without passing through the age we call civilization. The meaning being that in America it feels that you can achieve anything, that there's no ceiling. You can imagine something, you can have an idea, the opportunity is there for you to do something. But there's no floor, there's no limit to how far you can drop as well. In this country, well, now we know we're in England. Okay, let's just say it. We're in England right now. England's boring compared to America. Compared to America, England is boring. The opportunities are much less, and it doesn't feel
Also,
like you have the same.
England, English people have got like they don't like people to do well. They like don't be cocky, don't go shoot for the stars. That's too much. They like to kind of cut
That
them
is
off
true.
at their legs.
That is certainly true. Whereas in America, they kind of celebrate you if you're successful because they want to emulate that themselves. So England is, it feels like you have less chance to do everything that you want. It's a lot more boring. But there are benefits to being boring. Like in America, you have high-speed chases and gun crime. Here you don't. I'd rather have it like here because to some extent, having it boring is nice. In America, yes, you can achieve all these things maybe, but also you can sink very, very low. The levels of poverty, of poor education, of health problems, of racism, far greater. I never experienced that much racism in America, but that could be due to my ghostly appearance. I know that if I got a tan and looked like my own race, I know I'd experience things that are pretty rough. Whereas here, yeah, there is racism and there are problems. But compared to other countries that I've been to, it's far more tolerant. Compared to Egypt, the Egyptians are racist against their own people. The Egyptians will be racist against, let's say you got three kids
Yeah.
and one's darker than the other. I don't mean it ain't your kid.
Yeah.
Your facial features, but just a bit more dusky. Why did God curse me with you? How can I get you a husband? My pale skinned daughter here, beautiful. The Egyptians will do that to their own kids. This society,
Can they be?
in
Are
England,
they ever racist against white people?
only if you consider racist to be queuing up to take numbers to kiss their ass. Yeah,
Can you be racist against white people?
well, you can unless you purposely change the definition of racism. Now people are saying, "Oh no, racism it's a structure, it's an institution." No, no, no. Racism is I hate your freaking guts because you're Iranian. You stinking Iranian scum. That's racism.
Clip it up.
Now, so if you hate somebody because of his ancestry or his culture or how he prays to God, it doesn't matter if that person has more power than you. You're hating him for things that are beyond his control. You might say, oh, religion is a choice. And not really. If you say to me, I'm going to shoot you unless you believe that there is no God, I could say the words, but I couldn't just switch my mind off. It's not really a choice. It's a feeling that you have. So if you hate someone based on these things, that bigotry doesn't cease being bigotry because the guy's more powerful than you or richer than you. If you hate a white person, a black person, whatever, purely because of that one facet of who he is, then that's racism. Unless, like I say, you change the definition for your own purposes and say, oh no, that's merely prejudice because he's in a position of privilege over you. It's that's when wokeness becomes a problem because you're purposefully distorting the language in order to get the result that you want.
I think that's why a lot of people like, because I think we mentioned this at the beginning, like a lot of your view, like I wouldn't call you woke in any way, but a lot of what your views, what you were telling me when I was like, when we were 15, 13, are now considered actually, these are really woke and progressive. So it's kind of come full circle what you're saying. But so a lot of people, I think, most people will agree, yeah, racism is bad, let people do what they want with their lives. But it's the way woke people, they're not happy with just having, with what they've got. They want to force you to, not just say what they want you to say, believe what they're telling you to
There's a
say.
video. There's a video of I can't remember exactly. It might have been she may have been Latin American. She may have been African American. I forget. Either way, she wasn't white. And she's interviewing some guy in the street, and he says something that she dislikes. She says, "Oh, well, that's white privilege." He said, "I'm Palestinian." It's like, oh. And then she goes, "Oh, well, happy Ramadan." He goes, "No, I'm Christian Palestinian." And you can see her mind is getting blown now. Because number one, she thought he was white. Turns out he's from the Levant. Secondly, she assumed he's Muslim. It turns out he's Christian. So she's like, "Oh, so do I like you or hate you now? Because suddenly I thought you were white. Turns out you're just very, very pale skinned from the Levant. I thought you're Muslim. Turns out you're Eastern Christian." So she hadn't been prepared yet for how to view him. So if your view on a person can change positively or negatively based on that person's race or religion or culture, then your view is probably garbage. Like if I thought more of you because of where your dad comes from, then I'm not viewing you for you. I'm viewing you because of your dad or your blood or your religion. And what is being called woke seems to be saying all these things that you can't control, the nature of your birth, the nature of your skin, the nature of your blood. We're going to use those to put you in a category, even if you don't want to be in it. Like, what's my category?
Yeah, what is your category?
Well, I always put other because there's no category for Northeast African Mediterranean. It doesn't exist. But I hate the word or the term Middle East. I would never put that.
Why do you
Um,
hate the term Middle East?
because it's a fake term created by Western governments to compartmentalize my part of the world. The Middle East, by definition, cannot include Morocco, but Morocco is an Arabic-speaking country. The Middle East, by definition, must include Turkey, which doesn't speak Arabic. So it's taking me out of one region, putting me into another one, without even asking me what I think. And also, if you live in Egypt, it's not the East to you, it's just where you are. The East is someplace else, and the West is someplace else. It's only Middle East if you happen to be in the West. So it's a very disingenuous term, and it's used to chop up different parts of the world to make it more convenient for Western governments. So I would never call myself Middle Eastern. I spit on anyone who calls me that. I would say the better region to describe it as is North Africa and West Asia. People in America think Asia means China and Japan. But your dad's from Asia. Indeed, your dad is from one of the most important countries in Asia.
That's
No one
right.
knows anything about Iranian history. Iran's history is splendid and amazing. No one knows about that. But it's an Asian country, it's West Asian, and it's one of the most important countries in the whole continent. But if someone says to you, you're Asian, think, well, I'm not Chinese or Japanese or Indian or Pakistani. So, okay, I'm Middle Eastern. I would never use that term for you or for me.
I'm Aryan, aren't I?
Uh, again, there's the risk of these little of snippets of our conversation being taken out of context. Hey, I'm Aryan. Um, Iran means the land of the Aryans, but it's not the Aryans as they were reinvented by a certain mustachioed man from
So
Austria. Um,
explain that because go bad's like I am Aryan. I'm like I don't think you are. The darkest guy I've ever seen. So how does
yeah.
that work? Iranians
Okay.
thinking they're Aryan.
Okay. I've never really viewed Iran as being ancient, just because Egypt is even more ancient.
Hmm.
But objectively speaking, Iran has a history going back way back into the darkest depths of recorded history. So many different empires, Iranian empires, dynasties, so much knowledge, so much contribution to human society. Iran has all of that. And within its own society, it always called itself Iran. Persia is just a part of Iran.
It does sound better
Persia,
though.
you're only saying that
Persia.
because you're only saying that because the branding has taken a hit in the past 40 years. If you go like 3,000 years, Iran sounds great. The present day, not so much. But Persia is to Iran what England is to Britain. It's the biggest part, the most populous, the most influential, which gave its language to the whole country. Persian or Farsi is the language of the Persians. But there are other Iranians. There are Azeris, there are Bakhtiaris, there are Kurds, there are Arabs, there are Armenians, and they're all part of it. And with some exceptions, most Iranians, regardless of their ethnicity, are pretty hardcore about being Iranian. They like being Iranian. They may dislike the government, but they're pretty nuts about being Iranian. So the word Iran, it's a cognate for Aryan. Hitler, he's like, oh yeah, Germans are Aryans. Maybe you got dark hair, you look a little dusky, but your view of the perfect human is blonde hair, blue eyes. Not that many people in Tehran with blonde hair and blue eyes.
So why do
You
they
are.
call themselves? So what is an Aryan then? Why do they call themselves Iranians?
Uh, if you read Mein Kampf, and again, we're at risk here of getting our words distorted. Mein Kampf is one of the most boring books ever. And you think a book written by a genocidal maniac would have some oomph to it, a bit of a must read. So freaking boring. Because the way that you speak in a speech with all the fire and brimstone and we must do this, must do that, it doesn't always cross over that well to the written word. Hitler writes like an angsty teenager who never got laid. It's just a really frustrating book and this and that. And he uses pseudo history. He says, for example, the Germans are the greatest civilization in history, and all throughout our history we've been great. And there's no footnote. Like you would expect to say, okay, one, for example, Battle of whatever. Doesn't do that. He said, like, Aryans have the far better biology and just physically were better. Should be footnote number two. Please refer to this peer-reviewed document from whatever university. No, he just pulls out of his whatever. So he just keeps making these wild, baseless claims and doesn't explain where they come from. So he says that we are Aryans, and so are the Dutch and the English, not the Scots, only the English. The Scandinavians, but not the Finnish. And we are superior, and everyone else is below us. And there are different tiers to how low they can go. But he doesn't give any scientific explanation because there is none. He doesn't give any genuine historical explanation because there is none. So it's based more on turning his speeches into a book, which makes it freaking boring.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
but how does that relate to why Iranians are Aryan?
well, I suggest have a seance with the ghost of Hitler and say,
Oh, okay. So
why did you?
what's the difference
Well,
between what's the difference between
deal with it.
Iranians and Arabs? Because we're not Arab, are we? I think that's
Some
a misconception. Like there's some
okay,
Iranians are Arabs, but in general we're not an Arab country, and
no,
that's
okay,
why, and we're not liked in the Middle East, as we say,
okay.
or the term Middle East.
Um, there are two different meanings for the word Arab. One is an expansive term, one's a very narrow term. The narrow term for Arab is someone from the Arabian Peninsula or descended from someone from the peninsula. But that's a very small group of people. That's 6 countries and maybe 100 million people, if that. The other term is very expansive. It means all the different civilizations, Egypt, Babylon, Canaan, Carthage, who had their own history, their own heritage, but who over the past 14 centuries embraced the Arabic language, aspects of Arabic culture, and became identified as Arabs. The people of Andalus, Muslim Spain, they were almost all Europeans, but they were Arabs. Their ancestry was not from what's now Yemen or Saudi Arabia or anything like that. Their ancestry was from Europe, but they spoke Arabic. So Arab has those two meanings, neither of which applies to the Iranians. The Iranians are not part of that at all. Um, Egypt adopted the Arabic language. So did the Levant, so did Morocco, so did Babylon or Babylonia, but Iran did not. The Iranians kept their own language. And so they were never Arabized. They maintained a distinct identity. So by the time of the 20th century, when you have nationalism arising, an Egyptian would say, even though I'm not Syrian, I identify with the Syrians. And an Algerian would say, even though I'm not Palestinian, I identify with the Palestinians. So Africans and Asians identify with each other based on a common heritage. The Iranians like, nothing to do with us. We have no involvement with this. You do whatever you want to do. The Iranians have more in common linguistically with Pakistan because of the Urdu language, with Tajikistan, with parts of Azerbaijan, which were formerly part of Iran. They have their own thing going on. So it's kind of like you have friends that are also my friends.
Mm.
I have friends that are also your friends. But you have friends that I don't know, or I don't like, or I know them, but I hate their guts. So I won't name anybody. But that's kind of like the Arabs and the Iranians. They have things in common, but they also have their own life to the side. So if you try to tell an Iranian you're Arab, say, really, I had this ancient civilization. I never took your language. I got my own thing going on. I had my own empires. Leave me out of this.
And what about the helicopter crash?
Well, I'm not one to point fingers, but it does seem pointing the finger here. Yeah. It does seem a little bit convenient that just a few weeks after things went down, a man's helicopter crashes. Now, I'm not saying anything, but if I were minded to go towards conspiracies, I might say that someone had something to gain from his helicopter going down. That being said, the Iranian president does not run Iran. The office of president of Iran is not like it is in America. You're aware of this? No, you're not.
Please elaborate.
Okay. You remember when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was the president, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, he's so insane! He will do all these terrible things. He could blow up the world." Well, he couldn't because the Iranians don't have that ability. They're under sanctions for 40 years. But even if he did have that ability, he's not running the show. The elected president does not run Iran. The elected president exists so that there can be some kind of public involvement in the system. But the actual leader of Iran is the supreme leader. The clue is in the name. His title is supreme leader. It sounds like from a comic book. That's his actual title, supreme leader. And he's been in since, well, 88, 89.
How'd you become the supreme leader?
Well, let's say if today he resigned, which he's not going to do, but let's say if he did, there is a Council of Guardians, which again sounds like it's from a Marvel comic book. The Council of Guardians would help select a righteous individual who has the right stuff to take on the heavy burden of leading Iran, and that's how he would emerge from the others. But he's the one in charge. The president does not control foreign policy. That's the supreme leader. The president can have the economic policy, a health policy. He can get involved in various different things domestically. And he can speak for the country internationally. But he does not control the military. He does not control final foreign policy decisions. So even though he died last week, it does not in and of itself change what's going on because the supreme leader is still alive and kicking. And even when they elect a new president, and the Americans will pretend, oh, there's no election, there's this and that. Oh, really? I don't see you complaining about the absence of democracy in some other countries in the area, a little to the west. We won't name who they are, but
I'll name them.
Well,
Saudi Arabia.
I mean, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Bahrain. What elections there? Oh, there are elections. Yeah, sure, okay, fine. I appreciate that there are. There's more democracy in an afternoon of an Iranian election campaign than there has been in the entire history of some of these states. Not to say it's a good system, and not to say it's not filled with rigging and censorship and other things, but I would say, as a non-Iranian, as bad as it is, there are far worse systems. And immediately that's going to produce Iranian monarchists going nuts. Here's the thing about Iran. Um, most Iranians are cool and chilled out. The ones who are really psycho into the current system and the ones who are psycho into the old system, they're as bad as each other. You have people saying, oh, when the Shah was there, oh, the Shah, the Shah. They're talking like when he emptied his bowels, the scent of roses filled the palace. Although when he cracked wind, it was like a Mozart symphony. He's a mass murderer. Killed 30,000 people, secret police, torture chambers.
Well,
He was
wasn't
a
this butcher
collaborator.
of, wasn't this president called the Butcher of Tehran as well?
Yeah, but look who's calling him that.
Yeah.
There are that's another deep rabbit hole to go down. I'm not going to take on the role of saying anything positive or complimentary about the current system, except to say that you have people pretending that pre-1979 it was amazing. In that case, you have to explain why it was that before Ayatollah Khamenei had even landed in the country, you had millions of people in the streets. The only country in the world that would accept the Shah was Egypt. Everywhere else said, we don't want you. America said, we don't want you. You're toxic, stay away. Mexico, no. Panama, no, get the hell out. The only country that would accept him was Egypt. And that was purely because of the bromance between him and the Egyptian president. He was that bad a man. But because, oh, I don't like the current
Wait,
one,
wait.
therefore
When
this
you
one's
say
great.
accept him, you need to explain. So in 1979, what, he was ousted in a coup. He had nowhere to go.
No, 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 no. It wasn't a coup. He was put in power by a coup. In the 1950s, Iran had a democratic government. And that government said, we are compulsorily purchasing all the shares in the national oil company. It wasn't theft. It was to say that the Iranian state is going to buy all these shares in the oil company. We'll give you the value price of them, but we will own them. Those shares were owned by the British. It was the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. So the hell with this. Well, like, what's next? You want to make your own decisions regarding foreign policy? No, 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 no. So Churchill speaking with Eisenhower. It's like, what we're going to do with this guy? Well, there is a monarch there. Why don't we get rid of the democratically elected prime minister and disappear him and make the Shah the absolute monarch? And that's what they did. So the coup was in '53. Got rid of the prime minister and made the Shah the absolute ruler. And the Shah then ruled from '53 onwards. The Savak secret police were murdering people, torturing people, horrible things.
For what though?
And if you said anything that was contrary to the Shah's policy, if you said anything contrary to what the police were doing, if you had an opinion about foreign policy which was different to what had been decreed by the government, you could go to jail. You could be tortured. You could be killed. You could be disappeared. The Iranian Revolution did not begin as an Islamic revolution. It was a large uprising. You had leftists, socialists, communists, trade unionists, conservative factions. It was a groundswell of opposition to this disgusting, mass murdering American puppet. And eventually, the ones who managed to take over out of all this swirling groundswell were the supporters of Khomeini. But initially, it was the majority of the country against this one man and his regime. So he fled to avoid being arrested, and no one wanted him because he's now out of power. He is bringing with him this whiff of murder and torture and everything negative. So why would we give him refuge? And like I said, the only place that did was Egypt, because the president and him were buddies. But if you look at the origins of the revolution, it was not about creating a so-called Islamic State. It was getting rid of a regime which had been created by the US and UK governments to suck out the wealth of Iran and use Iran as a base of operations in the region. And when finally they said no, they had to punish them with sanctions, punish them with threats of invasion. Anyone listening to this can look at a map of the US government bases around Iran. It's a freaking joke. Every single corner surrounding Iran has US bases. But if Iran put a toenail in Mexico, you have a nuclear war. So the Iranians are not allowed to break wind without asking the US government for permission. Otherwise, they're called terrorists. But the US government can put bases everywhere, but Iran's a danger, according to them. And I'm not even Iranian.
Just to show this. Let's see if I can do that. That's what it looks like. No, not that. Why is it showing that? Should be showing this. Oh, well, I can't show you what it looks like.
It showed it for a second. Try again.
Why has it got this? Why has it got my... Let's shut that down. Now, what is showing the screen? Zoom to app windows. Is that better? Can you
There
see
we
it?
go. That's
Right.
it. So
I mean,
basically,
to be honest, why have Iran put their country in the middle of their bases? That's the real question.
it's very inconsiderate. The Iranians had the temerity to build a civilization not only on top of America's oil, but in the middle of America's bases. It's just you can't have that, man. They deserve to be punished. I remember when I was writing a policy paper for I'll be careful in what I say. It was a big event, an international event, and I was asked to write about Iran's clandestine nuclear program. But at the time, and even now, the evidence to support what's being said is not there. Whatever you want to say about their motives, they haven't attained the technology, they haven't attained the level necessary to build nuclear weapons. And so much of this is done as a pretext, like with Iraq, to attack, to invade, to marginalize. So I didn't want to put about that, particularly with this audience. So I changed Iran's clandestine nuclear program to Iran's progress towards uranium enrichment, which I thought was a much nicer way of saying it. Which is true, though. That's a neutral way of saying it. They are progressing towards uranium enrichment. What they do with that, I can't say. Maybe it's for electricity, maybe it's for nuclear power, maybe it's shock horror, is to have the same ability to defend themselves as the US does, as the British do, as the French do. Why is it you can have this whole gamut of defense, but me, who is surrounded by you on all corners, I can't do anything? But that's another topic for another day, perhaps.
Perhaps it is. Quickly before we call it a day, what's the difference between Shia and Sunni? That's a light topic to end.
If we do this again, we can perhaps leave the Muslim stuff to a different forum.
Well, only because Iranians are different type of mission to everyone else in the region. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay. So growing up, I knew there was a difference because I'd see it on TV. But I wouldn't know, because in Egypt there are almost no Shia. In Egypt there are Sunni Muslims and there are Orthodox Christians. A sprinkling of others, but that's about it. So you don't really call yourself a Sunni, you just say Muslim, because that's the default setting. It only becomes an issue where they're next to each other, such as in Lebanon, in Syria, Iraq, and then in Iran. So my dad even had very little knowledge. He knew that there was a difference, but not so much. The differences are quite significant. And it's kind of like if you were to put the differences between Catholics, Orthodox, Christians, and Protestants. There's some things which, if you only grow up Protestant and you have no knowledge or whatever, you're like, wait a minute. You believe the wafer is really Christ's body, but it's a biscuit. What are you talking about? Whereas for a Catholic, it would be second nature. He's only known that. So there are some differences significant between them. I think the easiest way to say it is Sunni Islam is supposed to be that it's just you and God. There's no intermediary. There's no priest in Sunni Islam. There's no priest at all. No one has any special powers. You can speak to God directly. You do not need anyone else involved. Shia Islam has a lot more reverence and a lot more hierarchy for religious scholars, for religious bodies, giving decrees, so on and so forth. Which is why Khomeini and now Khamenei have such power
Khamenei,
because
Khamenei.
because if your whole system has deference to someone more wise than you, someone who has a mission to help you commune with God, it's a lot different to if you can just chat to God directly. Like if I do something bad, I say I'm sorry, but as a Catholic, you're supposed to go to church and tell the priest. You say, listen, Father, sorry, I skipped school and went to the brothel. And then he would
I
say, I
didn't.
forgive
I
you.
didn't. That's a lie. It's not true in any way, shape, or form. I did
No,
not do that.
that isn't true. That was just a random example.
A
But
random example.
so those differences.
Hmm. All right,
I'm
listen.
trying to avoid saying too much because when you get onto these issues, I already have now the Iranians coming for me because I said too much about the Shah. So I don't want to say too
Man,
much
I
more.
think I think you have too much faith in who listens to this podcast. I can assure you, no no
Listen,
Iranians will be coming after you for your views on the Iranian monarchy. At least not after listening
I
to this.
know, I know that comedian extraordinaire Justin Panks has a dedicated following amongst the Iranian exile community. So I live in fear now.
You didn't pay. Listen, thank you for joining us on this podcast, Louis, and on this episode of Three Speech. Hopefully, we'll get you back where it'll be a little less rambling. But I think for your debut, I think it was a good debut. You know, this isn't your format. You're not used to podcasts, and you're not used to kind of doing this kind of thing. So I think it was pretty good.
I'm not used to having to set up the camera and then the sun comes in because look at myself now. I do truly look villainous.
Yeah,
I look
and like
like I'm
every day.
scheming in my way.
You've shaved
But
your
yeah,
beard so it doesn't look like Leonidas, though.
I did that 2 days ago because I thought we were gonna do this yesterday. So on Friday, it was very pointed and very villainous,
Yeah, you should have
and
left
I
it
thought,
like that. It was funnier.
maybe
Maybe,
next
maybe,
time I
maybe
will.
next time you'll do it. Listen, there's nowhere they can follow you because you're not even on any social media or anything, is there?
Not under my real name, no.
Okay.
If I ever have anything worthwhile to say,
Or to
I'll say
promote.
it through you,
All right. Well, listen.
and we'll do
Thanks,
that.
thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Join the Patreon. Give us some money. We'll squander that wisely. I've been the Mad Lad of Jihad. He's been Mr. Lewis Chase. Bye.